It's The Log. I'm Charles Purcell. On this date, which will live in infamy, December 7th, of course, 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor. We honor this date every year since. Hard to forget such a momentous day in U.S. history. And even all these many years later, we still pause. 2,403 U.S. personnel, including 68 civilians, died in the attack on Pearl Harbor. And even more momentously, of course, launched the United States into World War II, where over 400,000 Americans died. And I think it's worth pointing out that as we stand today, approximately 280,000 have died from coronavirus, more than any American war except for World War II and the Civil War, and we're approaching those numbers. 2,403 fell on the attack on Pearl Harbor, nearly 3,000 on 9/11. Both of those records eclipsed last week by a single-day death count of coronavirus. I wonder if our grandmothers and grandfathers are watching us from their perches beyond this realm and wondering, what the hell are they doing? Why is the entire nation not unified in combating this scourge? World War II saw rubber drives and paper drives and food rationing. Men and women volunteering to risk their lives. We're just asked to wear masks and social distance for a while. We can't even do that. We have all of December, January, February, March. We've got a whole winter to get through. It's very likely we're going to surpass the World War II total of 405,000. It's very likely we're going to take a run at the nearly 500,000 lost in the Civil War. What the hell are we doing? And even though most of us are doing our best, too many of us are not. A small percentage can do a great deal of harm. If you have 200 people in a lifeboat, it only takes one jackass to shoot a hole in the floor of that boat, and we're all going down. Now, history has a way of sanitizing, of distorting, of manipulating. People like to frame the events of history in such a way that we can all get on board after the fact. We were talking about the Civil Rights era the other day. There's a perfect example. Today, everybody wants to claim Martin Luther King as their own. They all want to stand on the right side of history, even though we know damn well that the heroes of history are often reviled in their own time. So when we look back at the COVID crisis in 20, 50, 100 years, no one will claim the anti-maskers as their own. None of the elderly among us, not one of them, will brag to their grandchildren or great-grandchildren about how they defied masking orders and stay-at-home orders, how they fought for their freedom and denied the virus, the very fact of it. And again, it's not the majority of us. It's maybe, 20% at most. But that's plenty. That's plenty to provide transportation for the virus. That's plenty to shoot a hole in the floor of the lifeboat. But they won't admit to it. Nope. They'll be the villains of history. And in the books and documentaries, there'll be no debate. Does anybody take Bull Connor's side? George Wallace? The folks who gathered at lynchings? Who menacingly surrounded and threatened those sitting at the lunch counters? Those who formed the gauntlet that had to be held back by the National Guard as little girls walked into their schoolhouses? They're the villains of history. Nobody claims them. And that's how it'll be for the anti-maskers, the anti-vaxxers, those in the street demanding their freedom to shop, to party, to get their nails done. Oh, there's plenty of evidence, lots of pictures, lots of video. But when they reach old age, no, they won't admit it. They'll deny it, and as they pass into history, no one will claim them. No one will defend them. We won't have a day like December 7th to commemorate. Some of us might have, March 12th was the last day I worked. I remember that weekend. It was Friday the 13th. That weekend, the 14th, 15th of March, 2020, when it kind of hit the fan. Of course, we'd known about the virus for quite some time, but that's when a lot of us really took notice, went, yeah, this is, I guess this is pretty serious here. The NBA suspended their season. The Final Four was canceled. Like, wait, what's going on? Just had some stay-at-home orders from a couple of governors. Like, whoa, man, this is hitting the fan. But no, we won't have that date to commemorate like Pearl Harbor Day today. And even though history has a great talent for mythologizing, for sanitizing, it will be very difficult to overlay any heroics on this event. Doctors and nurses, of course, will take their rightful place as heroes, as they should. The Orange Menace and his followers will take their rightful place as the villains of this story, as they rightfully should. But the rest of us, I don't know. Time will tell how history treats us. But when a one-day death count can surpass Pearl Harbor, as it did last week, when it can surpass 9/11, as it did last week, and there is virtually no response, it's hard to see history being kind to any of us. Yep. The doctors and the nurses, the only heroes in this story. Well, it's that time of year. The end of the year, we see best of lists, and the word of the year, was it Merriam-Webster? Had the word of the year announced last week as pandemic. Yeah, we get the this of the year, that of the year, certain lists, best of. Well, today we get the announcement from Yale University. They have an annual list. Their additions, their updates to the Yale Book of Quotations. Fred Shapiro, Associate Director at the Yale Law School Library, assembles the annual list. Among them here, in no particular order, wear a mask, a plea from Dr. Anthony Fauci. Wear a mask, added to the Yale Book of Quotations. I can't breathe. Of course, the plea from George Floyd, made repeatedly while police officers murdered him. Yeah, the Yale Book of Quotations, this is no little bit of fluff. There's no real criteria except that they're noteworthy. They don't have to be funny or uplifting. They can be quite disturbing. Some of them are funny. Making the list this year, Joe Biden told a student, "You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier." I don't know the origin of that. Why don't you tell me? Send me a little note. I'd like to know where that came from. I don't know the origin of that. But we all kind of cocked our heads and said, what? Wait a minute, did I hear that right? Yeah, you're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. I need to know the origin of that. Someone let me know, okay? So here's the list. Well, they do have them in order here. I'm not sure if the order means anything. Number 1, wear a mask. Number 2, I can't breathe. Number 3, one day, it's like a miracle. It will disappear. Yeah, you recognize that, of course. The Orange Menace, referring to the coronavirus, made those remarks in the White House February 27th. And of course, he said it many times since, in one form or another. One day, it's like a miracle. It will all disappear. Number 4, I see the disinfectant that knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? There again, the Orange Menace from April 23rd, one of his coronavirus task force dog and pony shows. Yeah, he's a lying dog-faced pony soldier at his dog and pony shows. Oh, those were something, weren't they? How long did they do those? A couple of months. He was out there every day. He would time it just so it would butt up right against the evening news. Yeah, he liked his time slot. He even mentioned that once. Oh, we got a good time slot. Oh, mercy. Number 5 on the list of quotes added to the Yale Book of Quotations this year. Number 5, I will... Sorry. God, can I even read this with a straight face? I will never lie to you. You have my word on that. That was the very first press briefing held by White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany on May 1st. And then she went on to lie in that very same briefing. In fact, just seconds, literally seconds later, she was lying her ass off and has, oh my gosh. I will never lie to you. You have my word on that. Number 6, my most fervent wish is that I will not be replaced until a new president is installed. Of course, that's Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg in a statement dictated to granddaughter Clara Spera in September, shortly before her death. Number 7, oh yeah. If you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or Trump, then you ain't black. Oh, Joe. Oh, Joe. Joe Biden, in an interview with the Breakfast Club radio program, May 22nd. Oh, man. James Clyburn really pulled your ass out of the fire, didn't he? Number 8 on the list, the science should not stand in the way of this. That was the aforementioned McEnany referring to school reopenings in a news briefing July 16th. The science, oh no, let's never let science stand in the way. Wow. Number 9, you're a lying dog-faced pony soldier. February 9th was when Biden said that at a campaign event. Still have no idea where that comes from. And number 10, we are all Lakers today. Los Angeles Clippers coach Doc Rivers in a remark to reporters after the death of Kobe Bryant. God, it seems like such a long time ago, January 26th. So those are 10 notable quotations added to the list of the Yale Book of Quotations. Yeah, I like this time of year. I like these kinds of lists. They're kind of fun. They're kind of entertaining. They're definitely a little bit of a revealing look at the culture. Talking about history a minute ago, they're the first draft of history, a first look at what might stick, what people might remember of us, what we might remember of ourselves. Yeah, I can't breathe. That's not going anywhere. That is etched into history for sure. Man, what a damn year. It's hard to believe. We say it almost on a daily basis until it becomes almost trite. You know, all the 2020 memes. But seriously, man, what a fucking year. Oh, I really want to talk about this for a minute. Somebody else is on our side. You and I have spoken quite a lot in recent weeks about this ridiculous notion that the Orange Menace and his deplorables represent half the nation. I've gone to great pains to shout from the rooftops that that is not true. At best, it's about 20%. But because we have no democracy, they do have great power in governorships, in state legislatures, in the U.S. House and Senate, in the White House itself. Of course they have great power, but don't let that fool you for a second. Well, we've got some backup here from Aaron Huertas, who's a political writer, strategist. Headline, No, Trump does not represent half the country. Came across this, dated November 28th. Despite losing a major presidential election, conservatives are urging liberals to earnestly listen to, quote, half the country that voted for Trump. But are we really talking about half the country? And he breaks down the numbers for us, as I've done myself, but he does a good job here, backing us up. Did either candidate win support from half the country? No. In fact, no presidential candidate has ever received support from more than 50% of the population. Trump received 74 million votes, or about 22% of the country. Biden, meanwhile, received 80 million votes. I think it's up to 82 now as the count continues. Or about 24, I guess that would be 25% of the country. As I like to say, democracy is pretty cool. We should try it sometime. Yeah, that's Huertas' calling card. That's his little catchphrase he uses on his website. Yeah, democracy is pretty cool. We should try it sometime. But what about Trump's base? He continues. In the 2016 Republican primary, Trump received 14 million votes. That was enough to secure his party's nomination for the presidency. But it's just 4.2% of the country. 4.2% of the country. How about the people who regularly watch Fox News? The network's highest rating this fall hit 3.5 million people, or about 1% of the country. You guys, these numbers are small. They're minuscule. How about the people who attended Trump's rallies? If we add up the attendance at every 2016 Trump rally, it's 1.4 million people. A lot of them were repeat attendees, but let's be generous and count them all. Trump rally attendees represent, shall I give you a second to guess? What percentage of the country? 0.4%. Think of all the times you've seen Trump supporters in red hats on TV, in online news coverage, or on your social media feeds. They don't represent half the country. They represent less than 0.5% of the country. You guys, we got to understand this. We have two massively large problems in this country. One, we have no democracy to speak of. And two, the news media amplifies the deplorables. It gives us the impression that they're half the country. Now, I was born and raised in a small town about 40 miles down the road from where I sit now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. River West, the greatest neighborhood in the world. And as we watched the nightly news, all we ever heard about Milwaukee, every single night, what led the local news? Murder. Well, somebody was murdered. Crime. Somebody was carjacked. That's all we heard about. Giving us the impression that Milwaukee was a dangerous place. Don't dare go there. And anybody who's ever watched local news, it's the same in every city. It's been pointed out time after time how crime rates have steadily fallen over the years. From a peak in the 90s, for the last 20, 30 years, they've steadily gone down, crime rates. While in those same 20, 30 years, when you survey Americans, the polls will tell us that crime rates have increased. In fact, they've skyrocketed. That's what people believe. That's what people perceive. Well, the exact same dynamic is happening with the deplorables. They're sensational. They make for great video. The news producers and editors just can't get enough of them. They're so fun to watch. They're so interesting. They're so dangerous. They're so unhinged that we've had a steady diet for 5 goddamn years of the deplorables. And then because of the nature of our primary system, of our electoral system, and then they do actually acquire this huge outsized power, well, then, of course, that only feeds the news narrative. So everybody, the public, journalists, the political class, everybody's basically doing their best I'm not claiming any big conspiracy theory, no, not at all. But we're doing our best in a fatally flawed system. Or I should say fatally flawed systems. Because the news system relies on revenue. It relies on profit. They don't exist without it. And so the most dangerous, the most anxiety-inducing players are going to take center stage because they get the views, they get the clicks. And our system of elections, with winner-take-all primaries and the great power of low-information voters, ill-informed voters from the aforementioned news system, now we've got these winner-take-all primaries, and the Orange Menace floats to the top like a fart bubble in a bathtub. And all the resulting chaos of the last 4 years germinates from that 0.4% of those who attend Trump rallies, the 1% of the country who regularly tunes into Fox News, the 4.2% of the country who made the Orange Menace the Republican nominee. Let's go back to Aaron Huertas here and continue with his article. So why do conservatives consistently say they represent half the country? It's a rhetorical sleight of hand meant to inflate their support. By appealing to an ill-defined half the country, conservative commentators avoid discussing policy and bully liberals into accepting reactionary cultural grievances as somehow more popular than taxing the rich, legalizing weed, creating millions of clean energy jobs, and instituting universal health care. That's another thing you and I have spoken about. When you just talk about the issues without the labels put on them, most Americans in large numbers are in agreement on the left to center and even far left solutions. Look it up. Now, of course, Democrats don't represent half the country either. And thank goodness for that, because both Democrats and Republicans are corporate capitalist parties. They are the lesser of two evils, yes, have to admit that. You can't live in reality and not admit that. But again, go back to the public surveys. Americans aren't afraid of socialism. They don't like capitalism. But it's tough to break through when corporate and political elites hold the reins of power and are manipulating a non-democratic system. Huertas finishes, even this year's remarkably high turnout may wind up constituting something like 67% of all eligible voters. That means there will be roughly as many non-voters as there are Trump voters or Biden voters. If you love democracy, maybe that feels despair-inducing, but it's also an object lesson for people who desire a more humane, just politics. An excited base of just 0.4% can help catapult a candidate to the presidency. A cable news network that appeals to just 1% of the country can exert a remarkable pull on an entire political party. And a political movement capable of gaining mass support from a multiracial coalition of working people, something closer to half of the actual country, would be a dominant force for good in American life for decades to come. That's Aaron Huertas, and I couldn't agree more, and I've been trying to shout this from the rooftops. We have the numbers. And when I say we, I don't mean that we're all in 100% agreement on every issue. I mean the great we, the great coalition of decent, honorable people who want the best for this country. And any honest look at the polls will tell you that when the labels are discarded and when people are asked about the issues themselves, we are center-left to left-left. That is the truth. And I was happy to find somebody to back me up on this a little bit. Oh, speaking of backing up, the group Civic Action, talking about here, this very thing I'm talking about. When Americans are polled, those who are, and this is self-described, those who are more conservative on cultural or social issues, but more progressive on economic issues, That describes 17% of the electorate. Again, these are people who are describing themselves. People who would say they're more progressive on both cultural, social issues and economic issues. That's 46% of the electorate, self-described. Two more categories. Those who self-describe as more conservative, both socially and economically, 32%. And those who would describe themselves as progressive on social issues, but conservative on economic issues. By the way, that's exactly how Joe Manchin describes himself. That's 5% of the electorate, 5%. So, let's add up these numbers here. Those who are progressive on economic issues, 63%. 63% to 37%. You guys, that's not close. 63% of Americans are economically progressive. 37% conservative. And these are self-described. I repeat, when you take away the labels and ask only about the issues, Americans are much more progressive than they realize. They call themselves conservative, and yet they're all in for protecting Social Security, for protecting the Dreamers, for reasonable gun safety laws, for reproductive rights. When you take away the labels, Americans are much further to the left. And even with the labels, it's 63 to 37. It's not close. We have some work to do. We have to restore democracy so those numbers are reflected in the halls of Congress and in state legislatures and in the laws they pass. We have some serious reform, electoral reform, the power of the parties, money in politics. We have work to do. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying we have the numbers. If we can just get organized and do it. And we need media reform. The profit incentive must be removed from media. It's destroying our ability to understand our own world. Not because of bad people twisting their mustaches and laughing maniacally. No, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's good people trying to do their best in a horrible, horrible system that is fatally flawed. If we can fix the way we vote, gerrymandering, winner-take-all primaries, winner-take-all electoral votes in most states, if we can fix the way we elect lawmakers, and if we can remove money and profit from the essential, vital industry of journalism, we can save democracy, and we can save this country from the deplorables, as well as the do-nothing, appeasing corporate Democrats. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. All right. That's the log for today. A running start to a brand new week. I'm Charles Purcell. I love you. Talk to you tomorrow.